Just let me know when we're... Hello, everybody. Thank you for being patient. We were working on some technical difficulties, but we got it all now. We're good to go. And we're excited to start our last webinar with you for this year for our Making STEM Connections. And today I have a few things to show you. I try to always start off a webinar by giving you a couple of examples of making activities that you might try with the students that you work with. So I have a couple that I brought, and Patrick has one that he brought as well to show you. So some ideas, I hear a lot from teachers, looking for ideas of ways to use the materials that are in the kit. So a couple of them that I wanted to talk to you about today, one of them that I brought with me is the ArtBot. And there is a lesson in the framework, the lesson framework, that's called Art Tech. And one of the suggested lessons that you could do or activities revolves around creating an ArtBot. So I brought some examples of that to show you. Also, what you see in this picture is an idea of incorporating art with the makey-makey. So what you see in this picture that's on the right is some watercolors that are attached using the alligator clips that you got in your kit to a piece of paper that has watercolor on it, and then the paintbrush has aluminum foil, and connected to the paintbrush right here is one of the clips from the makey-makey. So it's completing the circuit when the paintbrush touches the water, which is on the paper and then is connected to the clip. It completes the circuit. And what in this circumstance, what the participants were working on is they had created their own sounds on the computer, and then anytime that circuit was completed, it played a sound. So as they were painting, they were creating music. And as long as they were completing the circuit between the clip using the water and the paintbrush, then the sound would come from their computer. So I thought that was a super creative way to use the makey-makey in cooperation with art or art projects. And the ArtBot is another example of that. So I brought a couple of ArtBots to show you as some examples. And one of them looks very similar to the picture that you see here. And in your kit, you received some basic electronic components that maybe you've used before, but in this circumstance, we're going to use them to create an art project. So what we have here is just a plain cup, and we have markers that we have added, and we have a battery, and then we have the DC motor that is here. And what we did is attach all of these. I just used tape, but you could use other methods in order to attach it to create our ArtBot. And when the circuit is completed, so when I connect these, then the bot will vibrate and then create the patterns that you see here on the paper. So that's one option of creating an ArtBot. Another one that is a little easier in terms of adding components or taking components away is using a pool noodle. So we cut pieces of pool noodle and then just use rubber bands and connected the markers. So it's a little bit easier than the plastic that's on the plastic cups, and you don't need to have the tape. So you can just reuse the rubber bands, and you can also add little fun things to your pool noodle. And instead of using a DC motor, something new that we have been trying is using a toothbrush, an electric toothbrush. So this is the bottom part of the toothbrush, and it has a battery inside that vibrates. So you can just put that into your ArtBot and then have your ArtBot then moving on the paper. And what you can play with in this circumstance is different weights, different angles of the markers. In this case, using the toothbrush, you're restrained to what kind of batteries you use, but different batteries will give different powers, different amount of power to the motor itself. And then you can see that the ArtBot is moving and creating this pattern or design. So if I alter the markers a little bit, then I might get a different action out of the bot. and get a different pattern that's created in the way that it moves across the paper. This is super simple to integrate new components into it. And it's amazing with just these 3 markers, if I change the shortness of one or how I position 2 of them closer together versus the other, how the bot moves differently, and what are the patterns that we see on the paper, just by manipulating those components in there. So definitely lots of fun, interactive. This would be great for a workshop, a STEM family night, that you could have this out and people could create their own ArtBot and then have a variety of art as the result. Now Patrick, of course, had to outdo me. So Patrick brought an ArtBot to show you as well that is a little more involved than mine.
Well, we got inspired by Jolie's addition of the feather onto her ArtBot. So we actually created another one, which is a little bit more intense, but it has all the same components. So as you can see, right here we have the motor, and then we just have a little bit of a weight right here. So this is just the DC motor that's taped down to the coffee container with a little bit of weight. We added a few more markers than Jolie's 3, and then we just used some duct tape to tape it. And then of course the battery pack here, googly eyes, feathers, and a little pinwheel. So if we just complete the circuit, you'll see that it's going to start vibrating really pretty heavily right there. And then you can obviously see just even in my hand that the markers are shaking quite a bit. So again, just a great easy way to talk about circuitry as well as combining a little bit of that art component as well. And like Jolie was saying, is seeing the different patterns that emerge based on what size the weight is, where the weight is placed, the length of the markers, and lots of different variables that you can add to this.
So he had to outdo me with that one, of course, of course. But wanted to show you some examples. Actually, I had a teacher who sent me an email asking about how to put an ArtBot together. So I thought I'd bring some examples of that here today for you all to see. Lots of variety. You don't have to make it with a cup. Obviously, Patrick used the coffee can. Anything that can act as the base for attaching the markers. Doesn't have to be markers. You could use paintbrushes. You could use crayons, you could use anything else that creates some kind of mark. It could be scratching, something that scratches on a surface and leaves a mark behind it. So in the lesson prompt, we actually call it a mark making tool. So it doesn't have to be markers, but that was just a quick and easy way to demonstrate that for you. I also wanted to show you an example of what some of your fellow teachers have been using, or how they've been using the materials in the kit. This little video that I'm going to show you comes from some teachers in Pella, and they were working with the Hummingbird kit, and their challenge was to design a amusement park ride or attraction. And what Paula was able to do here was to interview the students on the process that they used in order to create it and make this, and then the coding that was involved. So we're going to watch this video for a little bit and see some of the amazing work these students from Pella were able to do.
These are the boys that built the Amazon Prime, our one robot that we have done so far. So Ryder, do you want to tell us about your program?
Sure. So the first column that I have here is for just the flashing lights here that go kind of in waves. And I have it so that each one's intensity is set between a different amount of time so it can have that flowing effect.
Okay, and what did you build your program in?
I built it in Scratch.
Okay.
Working with the
So what I did, so for the base, what I did, I cut, so I had a piece of wood, so then this 2x4. So then I cut edges right here, so it's at a slant. So then I hot glued that and clamped it together. And then I built a box, so then we could put all the wiring and the motherboard in right here.
And show your motherboard box. Okay.
And then I drilled holes for the lights and then drilled holes for the stands, so then we could support that.
Okay, and what robotics components do you have? I see you guys are talking a lot about lights. How do you make it move?
So we have a servo that's connected to here,
Okay.
and that kind of brings it to what Ryder's.
All right, let's demo it.
Okay, so it has a little bit of a kickstart time, so I guess I'm just gonna.
Okay, and
So
that's
that
when
is
your
the
lights
lights
work.
Yep. These are the waves I was
Yeah,
talking
turn the
about.
music on.
And set the programming there. And so we had carnival music going until the ride actually started moving. Then we had like Amazon music, kind of a jungle type of music. We'll just wait until. Yep. So now we just have a little bit of waiting.
Load time, right? Got to get all those people on the boat.
So, and it just goes no higher than 180. It goes just about to 180, and the programming for this was going by angle because of how the servo worked. So I just started. It didn't work on negatives, so I just started off with 90. So here's this 90 position, and then it goes to 100, then to 80, and it just keeps getting bigger.
All right, awesome, guys. Thank you.
Caught that the name of the ride was the Amazon Prime. And so it was supposed to be a boat that was moving around in the Amazon. And that's why they use, if you see the box with the Amazon Prime labels on that, that's where they came up with the title for that, which I thought was pretty comical. So today what we're going to do in our last webinar with you is we're going to talk about what are the challenges of incorporating maker education into your learning environment, whether that's in a formal setting or an informal setting, and then what are some of the amazing outcomes that you see. So in the video that we just watched with Paula and her students, you see that they were able to create a model of something that they would design, and they coded for it. So they physically and tangibly built this boat, this attraction, this ride, and then they coded using the Hummingbird in order for it to do whatever it was they wanted to do. So that included the lights, it included the music, and then the action of the boat going back and forth. And those students were using Scratch programming for the Hummingbird itself. So I've had a few teachers ask me about that too, and I just want to remind you that if you received the Hummingbird kit, the Duo Classroom kit with your Making STEM Connection cart, then that program has its own, the Hummingbird kit itself has its own program that you can download onto your computer. That's the one we used in training, and it's called Create Lab Visual Programmer, and you can download that from their website. It does, however, require JavaScript. So if you're using a Chromebook or your students are using Chromebooks, then that will not work for you. So instead, an alternative is to use Scratch programming, which many students are quite familiar with Scratch programming, so it's a great lead into kind of another step in how they might be using that. If you are wanting to do that, you also can go to the BirdBrain Technology website. That information comes with the kit that you received in the orange box, and you download their special version of the offline Scratch 2 programmer so that they can, you can open that up and you see that there is a tab for more blocks. It's purple. And when you open that, you will see all of the Hummingbird components and all of the alternatives that you can do. So just like you can scale with the tricolor LED light, the amount of red, blue, and green light, you do that in Scratch programming as well with a numeric value. So you can change the number value for how much red, how much blue, and how much green, different than using the slider that is used in Create Lab Visual Programmer. So both programs work great, both have great options, and I'm always excited to see ways that teachers are incorporating the Hummingbird and the Arduino programming with their students, especially if they're using unique products or projects with them, like what we saw with Paula. So if you ever have a project that you'd like to share with us, you are welcome to email it to us at the Making STEM Connection site, or you can send it to my email. Otherwise, you can always share it on Facebook. And our Facebook page has become a great resource for people to share ideas and to ask questions and ask about resources. So I welcome you to do that as well. So some involvement on your part today in the webinar. I'd like you to think about for a little bit, what are some of the challenges that you are facing currently if you have begun implementing this into your educational setting, or those if you're planning on it or planning certain activities. What are the challenges that you are facing in incorporating the maker movement into your learning space or your learning environment? And so Patrick is going to kind of keep track of those, and he's going to convey those to me, and then we can work on having a discussion and addressing what are some of those specific challenges that you have. I will start off by sharing with you some that I hear from teachers. I was recently, just yesterday, I was in Manning, Iowa, and last week I was in Sioux City, Iowa, working with teachers around the Making STEM Connection program. And one of the things I hear about a lot is material storage. Where do we put all of the stuff? And how do we facilitate a checkout system for teachers on utilizing them? So sometimes the maker's cart is kept in a particular room, like a library or a specific maker's room, or a supply area, something like that. And then teachers are able to check those materials out. So what are the systems that you have used, if this is something that you have tried? Something that I have given teachers some direction on is to think differently about the materials and where they are stored and how they are used. So if you have the large cart, the large table, you can certainly use that as storage to keep all of those in, but you don't have to. You could make a tub system that's based on a topic, or is based on a grade level, or is based on something you're working on in particular with certain teachers. So maybe you're inviting teachers to come in and you're showing them, here's how we use felting. Here's how we use the robotics components. And so you might have available to those teachers or other people that might be using them, educators, those materials. So other things might be in a little bit deeper storage, and then you have those out and available for them to use at that time. Somebody asked me about where to store all their plastic bags for plastic fusing. And so her and I had a discussion about the challenges of that. And we came up with this idea too of kind of a tier system of bags that you would readily have access to. So instead of filling up your storage with bags from your local grocery store, which you probably could have access to very easily by asking students or community members to donate those, to not keep those in your storage, because you could have those in a very short amount of time. You could have a lot that you need for a project, and only store plastics that are unique or special, something in particular that you want to use for a project, and then just gather up some of those recyclable plastics just for that event or that activity or something that you are doing. Patrick, any thoughts or questions that people are sending in?
None right now, but if you do have any questions about any of the challenges that you face utilizing the maker kit or maker activities into your learning environment, be sure to go ahead and add them into the chat room. Can't hear me. Sorry, is this better? Can you hear me? Okay, gotcha. So yeah, if you do have any challenges that you have been faced by utilizing the maker kit or maker activities into your learning environment, go ahead and list it into the chat room, so we can hopefully address those throughout this webinar. Or if you just have any questions about some items that you might want to know a little bit more about, let us know. Can't hear now.
No, you're good.
Okay.
Yep, you're sending.
All right.
Okay, so go ahead and, as Patrick was saying, go ahead and put those in the chat box, and as we go through our discussion today, if something comes up, we can certainly, Patrick and I can address those, or maybe some of you can help us to understand ways that you have addressed some of those challenges or some of the outcomes that you have seen in using making in your educational environment. Sometimes what I hear from teachers is a lot of challenges with staff. So how do I get teachers on board? How do I get teachers to want to use this in their work with the students, or to get behind us and bringing a makerspace into our school. And I think that one of the key things in doing that is getting them involved and seeing them what making actually looks like. So having maybe an open maker time where you can invite staff members, and they don't all have to be teachers, they could be other support staff as well, to come in and try something, try out felting, try out using the robotics components, or maybe making an ArtBot or something like that, and then ask them to think about how this could support the work that they do. And maybe invite some collaboration between them while they are there with you about how this addresses the needs of particular students. Telling stories of ways that students were more engaged or got excited about or were challenged by, and how you worked through that with them. I was working with a teacher recently who is a Spanish teacher, and thinking about how could she use this in her classroom, and trying to really think outside of the box. And I try to get her to understand, or help to explain to her, that you shouldn't think of making as an additional thing to add to your curriculum. We are not advocating for you to say that you need to add a half an hour of making to your classwork every day or every week or something like that. What we are hoping for is that you find ways that making supports what you're already doing and adds a level of thinking and engagement for the students that you're working with, so that they see the real application of what you're doing. So her and I brainstormed some ideas of ways that you could incorporate making into a Spanish class, into a second language type class. And something similar could be done for English language learners, thinking about how language could be incorporated into any kind of making activity, or that making could then be incorporated into your language activity. So one of the true champions of making and using really hands-on, minds-on thinking in the classroom is Seymour Papert. He is championed a lot in the book Invent to Learn that you got in the kit. And I love this concept that he talked about, which is called Someday Monday. And he said, if you have a vision of someday, you can use this to guide what you do Monday. But if your vision of where it is going is doing the same old stuff a bit or a lot better, your efforts will be bypassed by history. So the idea is to really think beyond what you're doing. What are those big goals? Someday I would like my students to, or I would like them to have the opportunity, or I would like our school to have. And if you think that way, then you begin by taking steps on Monday. And you begin by introducing this concept, or begin by talking to people, or begin having community discussions about it, or having the students get involved in the decision-making process. And you begin those steps. If you don't start that process, then you'll continue to just do what you've always done. So I like that idea. And Seymour Papert was such a visionary, because in the 1970s, he was devising ways that students could use computers in a classroom, not just for word processing, but actually coding with computers. Now stop and think, what did computers look like in 1970? They were huge. They just did mostly calculations, and they took up huge amounts of space. But Seymour was already recognizing the future of computer technology and the needs of those that would be utilizing those computers for their profession. And so he was trying to think of ways that students could, already at that stage in the computer world, thinking about how could students get involved, how could they begin programming. So he was very visionary in his thought process and his ideas. So I highly encourage you, if you haven't been reading the Invent to Learn book and looking through that, I highly encourage you to do that. He's highlighted in the first chapter, along with other people that have been really momentous in the maker movement, even before it was called the maker movement, in moving that along. So another thing to think about is, or what I hear from teachers sometimes, is this idea that it's really scary. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to put hand tools out there for my students to use. And so sometimes I hear the challenges of, If I put the drills out, do I have to stand next to the students the whole time while the drills are there? And some ideas that we've had about that, as teachers have discussed it, is maybe having a safety training similar to what teachers do at the beginning of the year when you take your training for bloodborne pathogens or tornado drills or things like that. The training that you go through, and once you've been through that, right, then you have those skills that are necessary for you to do that again in that certain situation. So what if we started something like that for our students? What if we trained a particular number of students in how to use a specific tool, like let's say the cordless drill, and we train them on how to safely use it? Maybe there's a checklist and they have to meet the requirements of that checklist. They can show you how to change out the drill bits. They can show you how to plug it in and charge it properly, what is the correct storage for it, how to hold it, what are some of the safety concerns. And if they can meet all of those requirements, then maybe they are now a certified drill master. And as the drill master, then they supervise other students using the drill. So anytime the drill is out or the drill is being used, they become the supervisory position or the role in the classroom instead of you having to do it. And maybe there's certain students that you feel like this would be a really great opportunity for them to be challenged by that. And you still may need to, check in on them and do general supervision of what's happening in the classroom, but it could be a great opportunity for that student to take on some responsibility and alleviate maybe some of that fear that often we have of having these things out in the classroom. You could have that for the sewing machine, you could have it for the robotics components, you could have it for circuitry, you could have it for hand tools, and you could really spread that out amongst your class. And if let's say you're doing a week-long camp, let's say this is over the summer, then you could still have those kind of jobs or positions for students to have throughout the week and empower them with that knowledge and skill. So I have another quote here that I think is really important when we're trying new things and we're kind of pushing those boundaries for ourselves as well as our students and even the other staff that we work with. This idea that a ship in port is safe, but that's not what ships are built for. Sail out to sea and do new things. This is what we need for our students to do, is to try new things and to be innovative. We say that word all the time, but we need to provide the opportunity for that to happen. We were discussing earlier the Falcon Heavy launch that happened last week. I hope that you were able to see it or see a recording of it. And to me, what is inspiring about this launch is that we now live in a world where our students know we are on our way to Mars. It is going to happen. That innovative thinking, that design thinking is going to take us there. My generation didn't grow up thinking that necessarily. Maybe our parents did. They were thinking about going to the moon, and that was the world we lived in. But the students that you're working with live in a world where we are now going to Mars. And if you look at Elon Musk and the innovative thought process that he's gone through to develop this company, SpaceX, is really amazing. But you also have to champion all the failures, all the rockets that blew up on the launch pad or shortly after they were launched. And he used that as a learning opportunity. And he kept pushing it forward, and he kept guiding people to come along this journey with him and keep pushing us to achieve those goals that he set. And his goals are huge. His goals are to put a human colony on Mars. And he is working towards that every day, actively thinking of new ways and innovating, and all these other companies are contributing to that he is also developing. So we need to give our students those opportunities to push themselves in their thinking, to think innovatively, to try new things, and to do it in a comfortable place, which might be your classroom, or it might be the space that you're in, or the time that you have with them, is to encourage them to think differently. So it's okay if it's scary for you, and it's okay if it's scary for the kids, as long as we have those goals and we keep moving ourselves forward. I always like to bring some books to talk to you about that might be inspirational to you. And a book that I truly love called The Innovators Mindset is a really great book that was written by a teacher who was also employed at the district level, was also a principal, and now is a huge advocate for experiential learning and really pushing the boundaries of education to achieve student success. George Kiros is also fabulous to follow on social media if you're into that. And in his book, The Innovators Mindset, he talks about how to change not only your thinking, but the thinking of the people that you work with, including staff, including supervisors. And he says we rarely create something different until we experience something different. There's that collaborative mindset when students see what other students have made, or they watch a rocket launching from the pad and those booster rockets returning and landing back on a platform. They get inspired by that. So sharing these things, these opportunities with your students is really important too. Sharing their challenges and sharing their outcomes and allowing them to communicate that with others is a really great opportunity. So this is the book, The Innovators Mindset. It's a really great book to read as a group because it has questions at the end of a chapter, discussion questions. And so there's questions for discussion. So maybe this is something that you could do as a combined staff. You might start a book club and look at how do we change the way we think? How do we change the way we implement these opportunities, these learning opportunities for our students? So the Innovators Mindset is a great resource, a great beginning point if you're looking at how do we change the way we're doing things in our classrooms or with the students we're working with. Some of the things that he put there into the book, I love this, is 8 characteristics of the innovator's mindset. And he kind of walks you through all of this. And I love the graphics that he puts behind it to help us to understand what it takes to be innovative. And while he writes this book really for the mindset of teachers and educators, it definitely could be applied to working with your students as well. And understanding these 8 important characteristics. And I think it's really important to spend some time intentionally focusing on these steps and recognizing when we are using those, when we are working on some of those components of a mindset, like taking risks. You may have some students that are all for taking risks and some that are very apprehensive about that, and you may fall under one of those sets as well. But to be innovative, you have to be willing to take those risks. You have to be willing to go on that unbeaten path and find new ways for whatever this project is that you're working on, or this system, or new ideas, things like that. And so it's important for students to recognize that they should and can take risks and feel supported as they're going through that process. This graphic can be found in his book, and he gives a lot more explanation too on all of these different characteristics. So if you look at those 8, sorry, I'm going to go back here for a second. Some of the things in his book that he specifically talks about are these characteristics as an innovative leader. And I just broke them down here to talk about them just a little bit. First of all, you have to be visionary. You have to think forward. You have to imagine what could it be in doing that and help people to have confidence and also having that kind of vision. Being empathetic, understanding the needs of those that you are working with and that you serve, and recognizing how what you're doing has an effect on them. Models of learning, immersing yourself in new learning opportunities. Put yourself in some of these uncomfortable situations so that you can learn new things in order to create new changes. Be an open risk taker. Show people that you are trying new things and that you are taking these risks, and that, what are the challenges authentically that come with that. Being networked, which is really important. Making those connections with people, finding others that can help you in this process, that will help you to expand your thinking and think differently. And sometimes that means those are people you don't agree with. You may not agree with the way that they envision things or their opinion of things, but that still expands your idea thinking. So those networks are very important. Being very observant in noticing all those things that are happening around you, looking for those opportunities to maybe expand on something in particular. Maybe your students are really inspired by the Falcon Heavy launch last week. Maybe they want to expand on that and being observant into the things that they are interested in, or that is grabbing their attention, or that they would like to learn more about. Being a team builder, innovation often comes from conflict. So sometimes you disagree with somebody, or sometimes you have opposing views, and that can actually push you as a team forward because you bring different perspectives to the table. And then also the idea of relationships and supporting those relationships and feeling that sense of team in order for you to really develop and feel comfortable in that process. And also remember the activity that we did on being creative, your creative type. Harness that, remember that. That's where you are creative. Maybe you are an engineer and you're always trying to improve something and go through that design cycle process. Maybe you are the geek and you really want to process numbers, and that's where you're innovative. That's where you are creative. And a good team, a good group that's working together will have those all represented in there in some capacity. The astronaut, remember, the architect, the artist type. And while you may disagree with how some of those people are thinking or processing their ideas, those ideas collectively will move you forward as a group. So how do you foster that? How do you foster this culture of creativity and innovation in the people that you work with? So these are some suggestions that George Couros has in his book. And he says, focus on strength-based leadership. Focus on allowing learners' needs to drive our decisions. And I think that's a real challenge for us sometimes. What is it that they are wanting? What is it they are needing? And how does that drive what we're doing? Or do we look at the next chapter in the book and that's where we're supposed to go? Or the district says that we all have to teach this at that time. Is that reflective of the students' needs? Because innovative thinking would look at what are their needs and what are their interests and where do we want to go with that. Narrowing our focus and engaging in deep learning and not just skipping over topics, but authentically spending some time and looking into those topics and how can we expand that? How can we embrace that and internalize it and use it to go to do something else or to expand our learning. Embracing an open culture of thoughts and ideas and dialogue and challenges of different ways to do things or look at them. And then as an administrator, creating learning experiences for educators themselves so that they can see what it would look like in their classroom. So maybe if you're trying to help other educators in your building or in the group that you work with to incorporate more of these kinds of things, invite them in, show them what it looks like when students are engaged. And it might be loud, it might be messy, it might be chaotic, but you can guide them through understanding the thinking that is going on and the problem solving and what the students are getting out of that. So I wanted to show you an example of something that you could do, maybe to get other teachers involved or something that you might get students involved with, maybe as a kickoff event. It could be done in teacher, professional development if you get together, or it could be done with students as a beginning challenge. And we call it the Pom Pom Launcher Challenge. And I did this with some teachers at a PD session. And what I gave them was, as a group, they got a paper bag. And in that paper bag, they all had the same items. And those items were some straws and some strawbees, some note cards, rubber bands, binder clips, pipe cleaners, paper clips, and popsicle sticks. And the challenge was put forth to them that they had to use those materials to launch the pom-pom, which I each gave them so they had the same pom-pom, the furthest distance. So I gave this challenge to these teachers. You see, these are some examples of these teachers working on it. And it was really fascinating how they proceeded from the moment I gave them the materials. I asked them to each have a job. And so one person was the material person, one person was the architect, one person was the timekeeper, and one person was the questioner. So each group of 4, everybody had a job, and that job helped them to focus and know what their part was on the activity. And in that list of materials, you see there was no tape and there was no scissors. There was also no clarification of how we were going to measure it. That was intentional on my part. So teachers started working immediately, and somebody might come up to me and ask me, can we have any tape? And then I would say, are you the materials person? And they might say, no. And then I say, well, only the materials person can ask for materials. So the materials person then would come up and ask, and they would say, can we have tape? And I said, yeah, I have a lot of supplies over here. And they were shocked that the supplies were there and they didn't know they had access to them. And I said, because you're not thinking innovatively. Are you asking the right questions? Are you thinking about what your needs are in your design process? Or are you just assuming all you have access to is what's in the bag? So it was really interesting to see that none of the teachers at first, even though I had the tape and the scissors out, nobody came up and asked about them for at least the first 5 minutes. And then finally somebody came up and said, can we use the tape? Because they were so stuck in what was in the bag, they couldn't think differently about those opportunities. Also, nobody asked me how we were going to measure it. I just said, launch it the farthest distance. So then we got into a whole discussion at the end about how we were going to measure it. And I said, nobody asked me how we were going to measure it. So once I explained it to them, the system that we were going to use to measure it, then they thought, oh, I wish I would have known that because we would have designed it differently. And my point is that's how you have to think creatively and think innovatively and ask those questions and not go based on the assumptions that you've made of what was in the bag or what your materials or what you had access to. So this was a pretty fun challenge, and it was fascinating to see what these teachers were able to do in that short amount of time. They also had time limits. They had 2 minutes to draw, and they had to show me their drawing before they could get started. That was the job of the architect. And then they had 10 minutes to build. And then we had a lot of reflection afterwards on the process, how they would have done it differently, what were the challenges, how could they use this in their classroom. So some more information I wanted to share with you, another really, really great book. We're going to watch a video here in just a moment by Tony Wagner, but this is one of his newest publications called Creating Innovators, and it is fascinating his perception of innovation here in the United States and how we foster and how we grow that. He says, we have become a country that produces more ideas to solve more problems. We have to become a country that produces more ideas to solve more problems. We have to become the country that leads the way in developing the new technologies for a sustainable planet and the affordable health care. We have to become the country that creates the new and better products, processes, and services that other countries want and need. We have to be able to solve these problems. And in order to do that, we need to have people that can think innovatively, think creatively, problem solve, work together collaboratively, and communicate. All those things that you say that you want your students to work on. We talked about it over the summer. All of those skills and those characteristics. That's what we need. That's what the country needs. That's what the world needs. And we, as educators of young people, can encourage that and we can grow that. So we're going to watch a little bit of a TED Talk that Tony did, and it's fascinating his information that he gathered in writing a different book about this, but looking at what we are looking for in this country and what some of the top execs in different corporations are asking for in the employees that they hire.
Jolie, before we go on to the video, there was a question about going back to the roles that you had in the Pom Pom. Could you explain some of the roles that you had for that challenge?
Sure, I'd be happy to do that. So in the Pom Pom Challenge, they worked in groups of 4, and there was 4 jobs that they could have, and they self-selected these jobs. So one was the timekeeper. They had 2 minutes to draw their design, and then they had 10 minutes to work on it. And at the end of 10 minutes, they got no more time. So that was it. So the timekeeper kept track of those 2 distinctions. Then there was a question person. So if there was questions about, can we do this, or how would this be done, or somebody came up and asked me if they could tape it to the table, and I told them yes. And other teams said, well, that's not fair. You didn't tell us we could tape it to the table. I'm like, I know. That's the job for you to ask. Ask for more information. Ask for clarity. So the questioner had that job. Then there was the materials person. So only the materials person could come to the material table and ask for more materials or how those materials could be used. And then, what was the last one that I had? Now I'm forgetting. What? Oh, the architect. I'm sorry. The architect was the one who drew the design plan. So at the beginning, when they had their 2 minutes to design, the architect was the person who drew it all out, and the architect brought it to me to show me the drawing so I could see where their plan was. I didn't give them any critique necessarily on that drawing. I just wanted to see that they had gone through a process where they were thinking about their design and they had a plan of where they were going to go. So those were the 4 roles that I gave them. And again, they got to self-select those roles. So somebody, who isn't really, I don't know, boisterous or maybe is a little bit more quiet, they might choose to be the timekeeper because they just keep track of the time and let the group know. Now, they all still contribute to the work of the group, but that is their specific job. Great. Keep those questions coming, and Patrick will relay them to me, and either he or I can work to answer those as we go through the webinar. So we're going to watch Tony Wagner here for a little bit talk to us about play, passion, and purpose.
So how many of you are educators, past, present, or future? Raise your hands. Good grief. I'm in the right place. I'm a recovering high school English teacher. True story. How many of you mentor young kids? Raise your hands. I'm definitely in the right place. For 25 years, we've heard about failing schools and the need to reform our schools. Anybody want to go reform school? Raise your hands. Einstein once said, the formulation of the problem is often more important than the solution. I would like to respectfully suggest that our schools are not failing. They certainly don't need reforming. The system is obsolete and needs reinventing, not reforming. What's changed? It's simply this. Knowledge today is a commodity. It's free. It's like air. It's like water. How many of you have been on the Khan Academy website? Raise your hands. Yeah, most of you. Right. You know the quality of the education people can receive on that if they're willing to take the initiative. How many of you had to memorize the periodic table in high school? Raise your hands. Everybody. Good. So how many were there again? No, wait, I'm sorry, I didn't hear that. Whatever number you came up with is wrong because 2 more were added last week. And planets, are we up 1 or down 1? I don't know, I haven't checked my news feed today. And let's see, let's have a contest. Why don't you recite the 50 state capitals from memory while I Google them? Let's see who's quicker. Knowledge is a commodity. The world no longer cares whether or not you're smarter than a 5th grader or how well you do at Trivial Pursuit. What the world cares about is not what you know, but what you can do with what you know. And that is a completely different education problem. Then the question becomes, do you have the skill and do you have the will to use the knowledge you have acquired? Okay, so I got to tell you kind of an intellectual journey I've been on. 2005, I read The World is Flat by Friedman. How many have read that book? Scared the heck out of me because, as you know, he describes a world where increasingly any job that can be routine is rapidly being offshored or automated. White collar, blue collar, doesn't matter. Talked to him recently, interviewed him for the new book. He said, I got one thing wrong in that book. I said, what was that? He said, the pace of change. It's happening so much faster. So I worried about what kinds of skills will our young people need to get and keep a good job in this new global knowledge economy. And in fact, are they the same skills they'll need for citizenship and for continuous learning? Started interviewing a wide range of innovators, literally from Apple to Unilever, executives, U.S. Army, community leaders, college teachers, asking all of them, what are the skills that matter most today? What's important? Came to understand there's a set of core competencies every young person must be well on the way to mastering before he or she finishes high school. Not just to get a good job, but to be a continuous learner and an active and informed citizen in the 21st century. Very briefly, they are: number one, critical thinking and problem solving. What do they mean by critical thinking? The ability to ask the right questions, ask really good questions. Number two, collaboration across networks and leading by influence. Number three, agility and adaptability. Number four, initiative and entrepreneurialism. Number five, effective oral and written communication. Number six, accessing and analyzing information. And lastly, number seven, curiosity and imagination. So a couple things happened when that book came out 3.5 years ago. This is the Global Achievement Gap that Homa just referred to. First of all, I got a kind of affirmation from literally around the world that simply stunned me. Taiwan to Singapore to Helsinki to Madrid and kind of all places in between. Thailand, Bahrain, Birmingham, England. From Wall Street to West Point, people said to me, yep, these are exactly the right skills. I felt pretty good.
So I wanted to show you that I listed those 7 things for you. So if you were trying to listen to Tony and write them all down at the same time, I put them here on the slide so that you could copy them down. And I think what Tony Wagner is trying to talk to us about in here is this idea of what is it that we really need to teach our students. Remember our training over the summer or the fall, depending on when you came? Remember we had the list and I said, what is it that you really want for your students? What is it that you want when they're done with you in your class, or at the end of the week of camp, or before they leave your school, when you've been working there? What is it that you truly want for them? And you made these lists, and every session we went to had a very similar list. So people said things like critical thinking and collaboration and wonder and curiosity and fun and adaptability and being innovative and all those things that we're talking about. That's exactly what Tony is telling us that the world is asking for. So how do we facilitate that with our students? What does that look like? How do we adapt our learning, our opportunities for students to learn, to achieve those things, those kind of things, because that's exactly what they need. And it looks very different. He was talking about periodic table, for example, and how many of us had to memorize the periodic table. Well, what's the value in that? Because you can Google it right now. You can ask Siri to tell you what are the transition metals. There's no point in memorizing the transition metals, but do you know why they're called that? Do you know what they do? Do you know how we use them? What is the purpose of them? How can we search more for them? Do we need them? Are they going to be on Mars? Are they on, are we going to find those on the surface of the moon? That's how we need to think, and we need to grow that in our students. Get beyond the core information and recognize the importance of what they can do with that, and how do they use that, and how do they have experiences with that information, and how do they apply that. And that is what's going to get us to Mars. That is what's going to help us to solve our energy issues here on this planet. That's what's going to help us with overpopulation. That's what's going to help us solve those problems that we have in our community. And we, as educators, we need to foster that kind of thinking and give them opportunities to think that way and to experience that and solve problems and collaborate with other people and do more than just the worksheets that come with the book or with the activity. And it looks very different. And the challenge is then too, how do you assess that? And I think that in our framework, we provided you some ways to assess the 4 C's, those 21st century skills. But if you are familiar with your content or your standards or your goals for that unit or that week's activities or that semester, then you will find examples of students demonstrating their understanding and knowledge through this problem-solving process, because they will have to in order to solve their problem. Instead of repeating the same experiment that's been done 1,500,000 times, let them experiment on their own. Give them a base experience and then let them challenge their thinking and answer their own questions instead of us doing that for them. And in order to do that, they need to use tools, they need to use equipment, and they need to have these skills. It's extremely important that we provide them with these opportunities. And that's actually what we're going to be seeing in the world now, is the demand for that. So a survey related to innovation was conducted in 2011 by GE. They interviewed 1,000 senior business executives in 12 countries. 95% of the respondents believe that innovation is the main lever for a more competitive national economy, and 88% of the respondents believe innovation is the best way to create jobs in their country. So we need to provide opportunities for those students to foster and grow that innovative thinking and those processes, and experience that, and experience failure. What does it look like when it doesn't work out the way that you thought? How do you solve that problem differently? How do you come up with a different tool or a different material in order to complete the task? And to be creative and think differently in order to solve those problems. I'm going to go back one slide, sorry. The 10 fields that they are predicting will flourish in 2020. Again, this is a prediction. And so you can see these 10 here. We see scientific research, computer engineering, veterinarians, environmental science, healthcare fields, management, finance, and entrepreneurship. But what's interesting is in this report that was done is what people don't think about always is the need for innovators, because what may flourish in 10 years is something we can't even imagine right now, is a job or a field that we don't even know that it exists. So in here they talk about forecasters expect strong growth in traditional businesses such as used car dealerships, hair and nail salons, pet grooming, and office services, which means anybody able to come up with better, cheaper ways to serve customers will reap a windfall. Technology startups will no doubt keep changing the way consumers work and live, and nobody really knows what the next iPad, Twitter, or Pinterest will be, except perhaps some entrepreneur who's dreaming about it right now. He or she may have a bigger impact in life on life in 2020 than anything the forecasters see coming. That's the world that we're in. It is changing so fast, faster than it was previously, faster than we imagined. That's what Tony was talking about in his TED Talk. So we need to continue to encourage and support our students in developing those skills that will help them in that kind of world. And I included this, excuse me, this is a picture from the Governor Kim Reynolds' Twitter feed, and she's talking about proclaiming February as Career and Technical Education Month in Iowa, and the need for vocational training and vocational education. This is also going to be part of our future, is understanding how to use tools and technology, how to have those special skills, and not just content knowledge, but how to use that content knowledge, how to apply that, how to have purpose and see use in that. And making certainly fosters that the beginning steps in understanding how to use vocational education or many of those skills that are important in that. So sometimes I hear teachers say, I'm not very comfortable in computer programming, or I've never used the sewing machine. I'm not very comfortable with it. So I have a little bit of a challenge here for you. So my challenge is based on this picture, and this is just for you to think about to yourself. But what do you see in this picture? Just think about it to yourself. What do you see in here? What do you think this might be? And then I want you to think about what are some words that you could use to describe this picture. How might you do that? Based on your observation and what you see, what are some words that you could use to describe that? And then think about, what might you title this picture? What would you call this? What is this? And I would venture to guess that all of you probably have a different response. You saw different things in this picture. You might have used different words to describe it. You might have given it a different title. And the point is, none of those are wrong, because that's your interpretation. That's your creative mind looking at this and thinking of it looking at this picture and thinking of it from a different lens, from a different point. And maybe it doesn't even matter what the picture actually is. Maybe that's not important. You don't have to know what it is to still learn from it, to still think creatively and innovatively about this picture and the information that you could gather from it or what you could learn. So don't let what you feel uncomfortable with, or I don't have very much experience with, or I don't have a lot of background in, don't let that stop you. You can still allow your students to learn along with you, sometimes in the process, even if you don't have all the answers. You have more to teach than just what you know. So it's kind of what I'm talking about here. You don't have to have all the answers in order to teach something. You can still have a wonderful learning experience and exploring something, even if you don't have all the answers. You have more to teach than just what you know. And from that, then we can transition from this mindset of I have the answer, which is often what happens as a teacher. We feel like we're supposed to have the answer or we're supposed to know, and transition to how can I help you to find the answer? How can I help you to learn that answer or discover that for yourself? It's a transition in thinking. So here's another one for you. What is this in your mind? You can just think about it. What is this? What is this picture? This is Voyager 1. Just thinking again to yourself, what do you know about Voyager 1 and its missions? Are you familiar with it at all? Think about that for just a moment, of what Voyager 1 is. Voyager 1 was launched in September of 1977. The mission of Voyager 1 was to fly by Jupiter and Saturn, take pictures, the best pictures we had had at that point, and then continue out past the solar system. It was then altered, the mission was altered to fly past Neptune and Uranus, and it is still the only spacecraft to have visited these outer planets. It continues on past the Kuiper Belt, and it has entered interstellar space. It is the first human-made object to do that, to leave our solar system and to continue to be out there. It is still functioning. It is still sending back information to us. It has sensors on it that are gathering data. It was built in the late 60s and early 70s, and we are still learning from it every day. And there are scientists that are working on this project that have been there since the beginning of the Voyager project. And this is a quote from one of the scientists involved. He said, "We all knew we were on a mission of discovery. We just had no idea how much discovery there would be. We just kept finding things we didn't know were there to be found." And what you see here in this picture, this little blue dot, is our solar system from the view of Voyager 1. That's our planet. That's us from that aspect of space, from that lens of space. And so to me, what Voyager 1, what the mission speaks to us is, you have no idea what's out there still to be learned. We just continue learning. We continue searching. We continue looking for new things to understand and keep going with that process. And I love how he says, we just keep finding things we didn't know were there to be found. What a great way to think about learning, that it isn't all already there. You don't have everything that's needed to be known in 4th grade already set out. There's lots of things that we could learn. There's lots of things that could be learned during your camp or during your 4-H club meeting. There's always more things out there to be discovered and learned. And in terms of creativity and innovation, we can discover that and we can engage ourselves in that authentic learning to find those new things. I wanted to share with you always in our, oh wait, I want to show you something else first. Before I show you this picture, I want to show you some examples, some innovation that I have up here on this, this little small camera. So I was working on, as you see here, I was working on some circuitry components, And I started thinking about, like with the ArtBots, the problem with the ArtBots is you have to unplug and plug the battery back in order to get it to work. And I thought, wouldn't it be great if we could create some kind of switch so we could turn it on and off without having to plug and unplug the battery? So I was working with that, and I was also working on this idea of creating a paper lantern. So this right here, I'll leave it down here, sorry. This right here, this paper lantern I made out of fused plastic. So each one of, this is just paper that was folded and has a window cut out. And then I made all these different kinds of fused plastic in here for my lamp. Here's what the inside looks like. All right. So then I wanted to create a light source for my lamp, but I wanted to create a way that I could turn that light source on and off and not just have my LED light on all the time. So I began kind of messing around with this, and I have some copper tape here. I have the LED, I have the watch battery, and then this is a fastener or a brad. These are all things, except for the cardboard, these are all things that came in your kit. And then what I did is I created a wheel that allows me to turn this back and forth, okay? And it has a few challenges that I'm still working on, but I noticed if I could get the brad to touch, then the light lights up. So I could turn it on and off by moving this. There are some challenges with this, as you can see. I keep having to press it down. So I need to continue to work on it. But the idea here is a good one because I'm completing the circuit by moving the fastener over so that the light turns on. And then the idea would be that you would put this on top of it and it would light up. But I recognized there were some challenges with this, so I wanted to improve on it. This is my, my circle right here. So it's just between two pieces of cardboard, and it's moving my brad or my fastener back and forth. So I decided to try something new. So I made a little bit bigger lamp, and the problem with the watch battery that I had was you have to make contact with just the top or the bottom, but it's hard to focus that connection in order to get the light to light up. So I tried something different. So here I added a battery pack and some batteries, and this is a Christmas light, so it has a little bit more light to it. And then I have my fastener, and here is the wire. So this allowed me to control the wires that are connected here, and I used hot glue to secure them. So there's some hot glue over here, and there's some hot glue here to secure that connection. And then when I turn the wheel, when it touches it, then the light lights up. So I was trying to eliminate some of those problems that I had. So now if I put this on and then I put my little lamp on top of it, and it's kind of light in here, it's bright, so you probably can't see the light is on. But this is just parchment paper on here, and then I just used some like craft sticks to make this cube. So now I could have my lamp turned on, and then I could turn it on and off like that, so I don't have to undo my battery. So this is a great opportunity for your students. Again, you could demonstrate this kind of learning of, this is something I was trying out, it worked, but it didn't work great, and then I expanded it and advanced it from here. And now we could have discussions. Okay, what is it we like about this design? What do we need to change, or how do we need to expand this in order to do something else? What if we wanted more than one color of light bulb? Could we do that? Could we add a different color? Could we add a red light or a green light or a blue light in here and be able to control both of them? Could we turn one on, turn one off? I think it would be quite an amazing project to let the students kind of develop that. Nothing super technical. I didn't do any soldering in this. I just used hot glue and cut wires, used copper tape and the brad. So this is all stuff that is in your kit. This box, again, was just craft sticks and parchment paper that I cut to set there on the top. So there might be a project idea for you. Maybe, you could challenge your students to think about what's a way that we could manipulate something in order for this to happen. What is it that we want? How do we get that to happen? And let them go through the process of figuring it out. This is a lot of iterations. This was me trying out a lot of things at my desk. Patrick was sitting next to me, and I had the hot glue gun out, lots of cardboard, and cutting things and changing things. And then I remember when I finally got it to work, I was super excited about that. And then my mind was, okay, now what else can I do? How else can I change it? What can I add to it? So that it has a practicality. So this could be a little decorative lamp that you could have. You could get obviously a stronger light bulb or more light bulbs involved if you wanted it to actually produce an amount of light. You could add a sensor to it and make it, maybe the switch has to do with when the light goes off. So lots of opportunities to expand that. Okay, so now I want to go back to resources. I almost forgot to show you my little light switches. Always want to highlight resources that you can have access to that might support you in this process. One of them is the Youth Makerspace Playbook, which I've alluded to at all of our trainings. And they give some examples here, some specific pages to look at how do you address putting a makerspace into your classroom or working with the students that you have. Approaches and practices on page 41 through 51. Language is perhaps the most important and powerful tool used within a makerspace. Words have the power to invite, to inspire, and to potentiate, but also to shut down and exclude. So thinking about how you develop the mentality of the space that you're working in, and how do you invite people to be creative and to share their ideas and to celebrate that. Sustainability, you'll find some information pages 52 through 64. Brightworks School in San Francisco hosts one such maker in residence program. I love this idea. To further break down the walls that often separate school from the world, we invite artists, engineers, makers, writers, and craftspeople from all over the Bay Area to come into the school and use it like their own studio for a week. Students can watch the maker at work, and sometimes they're given the opportunity to collaborate or apprentice with the maker as well. So I love that idea of inviting somebody to come in and do what they do, and maybe we just observe and watch, or we have conversation with them, kind of a maker in residence or a scientist in residence that might come to your school. I thought that was a really great idea. In your Invent to Learn book, which we spoke about earlier, Chapter 12, making the case for having a makerspace in your school or in your classroom. I think this is really interesting. You should not make the case for making, tinkering, or engineering based on achievement or higher test scores. You may be tempted, since some people equate learning with standardized testing. But if you invite them in and they see engaged and excited students using nearly magical tools and technology, that will ultimately convince people to change the way that they think. So while we try to highlight in our framework lots of places where you can align standards, both NGSS as well as other core standards to making activities, challenges there are assessments and tests. There isn't a lot of research out there right now that links making to higher achievement scores, but there's also nothing that shows that test scores are going down. So really it's about this engagement, and we have to think differently than just our standardized tests in terms of a litmus to understand where we are with our students and what they're learning. Because with making, they could be learning practical skills, vocational skills, applicable skills, entrepreneurial skills, things that can't be tested on a regular test. The Art of Tinkering, another book that you received in your kit. On pages 14 through 15, they talk about be comfortable not knowing. It's okay to not know the answer. It's okay to not know how to do everything, but to learn and to explore along with your students or the children that you're working with. Seek real world examples everywhere. How is somebody actually using this? Where would you see this in your community or in a certain profession? And revisit and iterate on your ideas. Just like with the switches here. You know, how could we take this farther? I was just prototyping with cardboard and hot glue. How could we take this farther? Could we create some kind of lamp that has its own type of switch specific to certain needs? Or I could look at the power source itself. Could I use something besides batteries in order to generate the energy needed to get the lamp to turn on? You know, keep iterating that, keep changing those ideas and those thoughts that you have. Within the Art of Tinkering, this is one of my favorite pages on there. It's at the beginning of the book, pages 14 and 15, and they call these the tinkering tenets. So these are kind of these guidelines for making and tinkering, and they give you some examples kind of all of these titles and some support in looking at that, like reinvent old technologies and discover new ones too. Go back and look at the way things used to do. Hack old tools and components apart and find out what could I learn from this and how could I use this in future technologies. Use familiar materials in unfamiliar ways. Encourage your students to think differently. Just because it's tape doesn't mean it has to be used as an adhesive. It could be used for something else maybe. You know, think about it in a different way. Prototype rapidly. Try new things out. You know, test out your designs. Cardboard is a wonderful medium for trying out new things and prototyping and seeing how it works and then making alterations with it. So I really like this page that's in the Art of Tinkering. I think it's a really great support and very thought-provoking for us as educators to think different. I have a couple books that I would like to show you as well, some of my new favorite books. So if you received the K3 version of the kit, then you got this book, What to Do with an Idea. This book is an amazing book. The illustrations are kind of anime-ish, but student-focused. And it's a story about this little boy, and he has an idea, and it's kind of how he protects this idea and how does he grow this very delicate idea into becoming something. And it's a wonderful story about the challenges that he faces as he begins to grow his idea. So it's What to Do with an Idea. The author and illustrator followed up with a second one called What Would You Do with What to Do with a Problem. What would you do with a problem? And in this circumstance, the young boy has this daunting problem that follows him around, and he's trying to understand how to deal with it because it keeps following him everywhere he goes. And he learns some strategies and some ways for him to deal with this problem so that he knows what to do with his problem. And they just recently collaborated again to make a third book, which I am completely in love with, and it's called What Do You Do with a Chance? And again, we follow our young friend, and he has an opportunity to learn or to be exposed to this chance. This chance comes along, but he's too afraid to take that chance. And so he lets the chance go and later realizes that he shouldn't have done that. And he wishes the chance would come back. And he's worried that he's never going to get that chance again. And the story kind of follows, I don't want to give too much away, but the story follows the challenges that he goes through searching for that chance and that opportunity again, and what he does with that when he does find that chance. So I love these books, and while they are obviously geared for their picture books, they're geared for younger learners, I think the messages are great even for older students to understand and talk about. So I wanted to share those with you as well. Something else, since this is our last webinar, this is our last kind of video opportunity to talk and show and demonstrate things, but I'm always available by email and also through our Facebook page. So if you haven't already joined that, I encourage you to do that. It is a closed page. So I have to allow you to join, and I only allow people that are part of the Making STEM Connection program to do that. So you can see teachers from all over the state that have had the same training and have the same kit that you do, using it in a wide variety of ways. So we have extension people, we have teachers, we have private teachers, public teachers, lots of opportunities for you to do that. So if you're interested in joining that, you just look for us on Facebook. That is the SCI Making STEM Connections. I like this quote. I'm going to finish with a couple of things that are about change, because I think change can be very scary sometimes and it looks very different, and we're not sure, just like our chance with our young boy in this book, what would you do with a chance? I like this quote that says, if you dislike change, you're going to dislike irrelevance even more. The point is that we have to change. The change is demanding. The environment, our community, our nation is demanding something different from the students that we are educating. So it is imperative that we find the ways to serve those needs and to serve those students in a new way. And so along with that, I have one last little video for us to watch. And it's kind of comical. So please feel free to laugh along as we watch this.
Whoa, that's not good.
Oh, I don't need this. I'm already late.
Somebody will come. Anybody out there?
Do you have a phone?
No. Sorry. Somebody! Hello? There are 2 people stuck on an escalator and we need help. Now, would somebody please do something? I don't believe this. You gotta be kidding me.
I'm gonna cry.
Well, there's not enough left to do, is there?
Hello? Hey, don't worry about it. I'll fix it in a second.
He said he can fix it. All right. All right. That's more like it. He says he can fix it.
Walking down the sidewalk, kicking my feet as I'm moving to the music. Step to the beat. I woke up today, canceled all my plans, and I stepped right outside with my guitar in my hands, and the notes became loud as the sound caressed the air, and I kicked it up a notch as I strolled without a care, 'cause I'm going down the road to a brand new place, and I'll get there with a smile.
So I love that video. It cracks me up every time I see it. But it's a good reminder that sometimes the solution is right there. Sometimes there's an easy fix to the problem. Just get off the escalator. So if you're thinking, how can I use this? How do I talk to other teachers? How do I get more people involved? How do I get our parents behind us? Look at those first steps. Maybe it's a really simple solution. You start small, you take those first couple literal steps, and from there you grow it and you change it and become something different. And I think you'll be amazed at the outcomes, understanding that there will be some challenges along the way, but that's part of the innovative process. Remember that Elon Musk had a lot of rockets that blew up on the launch pad before he got Falcon Heavy to actually make it up into space. So in the last minutes that I have with you, if you have questions or any comments that you would like to share, Patrick is taking those in the chat room. Do we have any?
None right now.
Okay, so we'll still stay on for a few minutes, so if something comes up that you would like to share, please feel free to do so. In the meantime, just want to remind you that, again, you can continue to email me. I will be sending out, as soon as we get this recorded, I'll send you out the link. If you are taking this course for credit, remember that you have to watch all 4 of the webinars, and there are assignments that are associated with getting the credit or the grade for this. I sent those out again with the email today, so you can look at that. All of the assignments are due by February 28th, and it's basically a reflection of reading materials and looking at yourself, a self-reflection of how you're using these materials, and then a lesson plan, which is probably something you already have, showing ways that you're intentionally utilizing the Making STEM Connection program. Also, something to think about is that we are in the time zone of scale-up applications. So Making STEM Connections is again available for you if you're interested in applying for it. What I've been telling teachers is if you already have the Making STEM Connection kit and you're thinking, well, maybe I might want another one, but I don't have any room for that big cart. Remember that we have the alternative cart. We will have some alternative versions of storage for it, so you could receive more materials, so that you could have more materials for your students or to share with other teachers in your school, and just maybe have a different storage component for keeping those or sharing those with other teachers. Also, a little shout out too for our other program that was selected as a scale-up program, which is Pint Size Science. Pint Size Science serves pre-K through grade 2, and it is a modular kit where you get to select different titles according to your needs or topics that will support learning in your environment. And it's really exciting for us because Pint Size Science was a scale up a few years ago, was extremely successful, and we've now revised it and it's back again. And one of the titles that you can choose and select is called Tiny Tinkerers. So in our preschool at the Science Center, our preschool students have lots and lots of opportunities to incorporate making. They have Making Mondays where they go out into the museum and use some of the makers components in the museum. And we have developed a lot of activities and tried out many different tools and pieces of equipment that are absolutely appropriate for our young learners to also be engaging in making. So if you have questions about either one of those programs, remember you can, if you feel like it might serve the needs of some of your colleagues. We had a school the first year who received the cart for the 6th grade teacher for science, and then the social studies teacher applied for one in the same school so that they could work together as a team. So if you have colleagues you think would benefit from this, please feel free to share that information with them, and I'm happy to answer questions if you need assistance or help in the application process.
I'll just quickly add, there's nothing coming through the chat right now, but I do want to add, again, with that alternative kit, I know that if you had the K3 version that you've received the Cubelets, if you had the 4.8 version, then they had the Hummingbird kit. We understand that the Hummingbird kit, you only have those 4 motherboards, basically, those 4 boards that you can use to program things. So this is a great opportunity for you to get another set of the Hummingbird or another set of the classroom materials for the Cubelets, more make-dos, which are those the cardboard nuts and bolts, basically, more strawbies, and so there's lots of materials available for you if you do want to have some additional components with the alternative kit, but you just don't have that space for the big cart. So just encourage you, if you are looking for things like that, to go ahead and apply and see if you're selected once again. And it also allows more teachers to receive that professional development as well.
Wonderful. Thank you, Patrick. Thank you to all of you for participating in our webinar. You're always welcome to call me or email Patrick or I. We can answer questions if you have them about how to use something in your classroom. I'm continuing to go across the state and do additional professional development. I've been able to work with a lot of teachers to give them some extra experience with it and some instruction on how to incorporate the different tools or even a makerspace in their learning environment. So look for those if you see any of those coming to your region or your area, and just let me know if you have questions or any needs between now and the end of the application process, or by the end of the month if you're taking this for credit, or if you just have questions as the year goes along. All right? Wonderful. Thank you.